Matthew 26. When Jesus had finished saying all these words, he said to his disciples, "You know that after 2 days the Passover is coming, and the Son of Man will be delivered up to be crucified." We know that Jesus gets crucified, right? Because we've read this a bunch of times. But they do not expect this. And Jesus has just been talking, and they're like, yeah, they're getting riled up, they're getting ready. And Jesus is like, hey, just a reminder, I'm going to get killed. And not just killed, like, I'm going to get crucified, which was by far the most horrific, terrible way to go in that day and age. Like, the Romans had established this as like a horrific torture. And so the disciples are like, hang on, what? Okay, so like Jesus is again like, hey, everything that we've been doing, everything that we're setting up, it's still leading to my death. It's still coming. Don't forget that. Then the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders of the people were gathered together in the court of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas. They took counsel together that they might take Jesus by deceit and kill him. They said, not during the feast, lest a riot occur among the people. So we have Caiaphas here, and this is one of the things. He's actually one of the longest running high priests during this period of time because there's a lot of tension. And I guess he gets established by the secular world, and he's the high priest established by the secular world. So people don't like him, and some people are like, not my pope. Okay, so like that's like one of the things that's pope, right? No, not my high priest. Okay, so like that's kind of one of the ideas that's out there. And so we've got this historical element and this piece here, and this guy, he's not necessarily loved by everybody, and he's there, and he's there to keep the peace. Like, he's like, I'm going to work with the Roman authorities to make certain that nothing happens, because stuff happens during Passover. Like, in 4 BC, like, things had gone down. Like, it's like there is precedent for lots of rioting and things going badly, so we're not gonna ruffle any feathers right now. We're not doing that. I also think it's interesting that this passage here, this idea of like they're taking counsel and they're looking for a deceitful way to kill him. And somebody pointed out that this could be from Psalm 31, where it says, "For I have heard the slander of many, terror on every side. While they conspire together against me, they plot to take away my life. But I trust in you, Yahweh. I said, you are my God. My times are in your hand. Deliver me from the hand of my enemies and from those who persecute me." All right. So like, there's even this idea of like, this is already established in scripture as just kind of this thing that exists. Okay. I just think that's kind of fun. Okay. Now, while Jesus was in Bethany, in the house of Simon the leper, a woman came to him having an alabaster jar of very expensive ointment, and she poured it on his head as he sat at the table. But when the disciples saw this, they were indignant, saying, "Why the waste? For this ointment might have been sold for much and given to the poor." Okay. So, Jesus is in Bethany, which is near Jerusalem right there. Okay, he's in the house of Simon the leper. And if Simon was still a leper, then obviously Jesus and everybody couldn't be hanging out with him. So this is probably one of the lepers that Jesus heals, okay? And so he keeps the nickname, right? Because he had it at one point in time. So this is like a reminder of Jesus' miracles and what he does, which I think is kind of great about that, okay? And then this woman takes this alabaster jar, so it's this stone jar with a very thin neck. And then you snap it, and then that's it. Like now you have to use it. You can't put the lid back on. Okay, so like that's there. And she pours it on Jesus' head. And this jar is like uber expensive. Some people say like 300 days wages, like almost a year's worth of wages. Like just to kind of give it a context of like how expensive this is. And so the people are like, wait, the disciples are like, why are you wasting all this? Like, this is terrible. Why are you doing that? However, knowing this, Jesus said to them, "Why do you trouble the woman? She has done a good work for me. For you always have the poor with you, but you don't always have me. For in pouring this ointment on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial. Most certainly I tell you, whenever the good news is preached in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be spoken of as a memorial of her." All right, so Jesus is like, why are you bothering her, right? Like, what are you doing? She's actually done something good. And you will always have the poor. And this is fascinating because this is in Deuteronomy 15. It says, "For the poor will never cease out of the land. Therefore I command you surely to open your hand to your brother, to your needy, and to the poor in your land." Okay, so like Jesus is not saying, hey, don't take care of the poor. He's instead saying, look, this is a special event, so we're doing something special here for me here. But like, you're always going to have the poor, so go be generous. Like this is here. What I think is so fascinating about this Deuteronomy passage is that if you scroll up, it says, however, there will be no poor with you, for Yahweh will surely bless you in the land which Yahweh your God gives you for your inheritance to possess, if only you diligently listen to Yahweh your God's voice, to observe and do all this commandment which I command you today. But the poor will never cease. Okay, so like, guess they didn't do everything that was commanded, obviously, right? Okay, but Jesus here, sticking back to this, Jesus is like, look, if you actually cared that much about the poor, we would have been doing something about that every day. But you're only complaining because of what she's doing, and that's not right. Okay, now, one of the things that's associated with this then is what happens next. But also there's other verses about Judas with this. But one of the 12, this might have been the breaking point, this might have been the last straw, who is called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, what are you willing to give me if I deliver him to you? So they weighed out for him 30 pieces of silver. From that time, he sought opportunity to betray him. So there are other passages that talk about Judas being a thief and all that kind of stuff. So money might be a thing. Other people have other theories. If you watch the film Judas from like years and years ago, whatever. They're like, hey, he was just trying to jumpstart the thing. Other people are like, no, he's just a greedy person. Other people are like, okay, he's disillusioned at this point. Like, there's a lot of debate about what's going on, because we don't have much in scripture about it. Like what's motivating him? What's he trying to do? We don't have a lot on that. But here, we know that he sells Jesus for the promise of 30 pieces of silver. Okay? Which, if you go over to Exodus 21, all right, it's this whole passage about this bull, if it gores people and all that stuff, okay? And if it has a habit of doing it and all that stuff. And if the bull gores a male servant or a female servant, 30 shekels of silver shall be given to their master, and the ox shall be stoned. So Judas gets the price of the lowest people in society. Okay, so people are like you're recompensed, paid for people based off of their social structure. It's like how valuable to society is this person? And slaves are not very valuable in society. Okay, so 30 shekels. And Jesus gets sold for 30 shekels. Okay, but this isn't it. Okay, because there's also here in Zechariah, what chapter am I in right now? I'm in Zechariah 11. Okay, sorry. In Zechariah 11, okay, it's this whole fascinating section, and I go read it. There's more, because it's all about the shepherds. It's this whole thing. Okay. But I took my staff favor and cut it apart, that I might break my covenant that I had made with all the peoples. It was broken in that day, and thus the poor of the flock that listened to me knew that it was Yahweh's word. I said to them, if you think it best, give me my wages, and if not, keep them. So they weighed for my wages 30 pieces of silver. Yahweh said to me, throw it to the potter, the handsome price that I was valued at by them. I took the 30 pieces of silver and threw them to the potter in Yahweh's house. Then I cut apart the other staff, even union, that I might break the brotherhood between Judah and Israel. So this idea of 30 shekels is not only this like, hey, Jesus was sold for a very low amount, the lowest that you really can get for a person, okay? And then there's also this piece of how this act is also breaking things in the relationship between Yahweh, God, and his people. I think that's fascinating. Okay, so like there's like two things going on just with this number of coins. Okay, I think that's so cool. Okay, there's so many cool things. Okay, now on the first day of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus saying to him, where do you want us to prepare for you to eat the Passover? And so this brings into questions about like timelines and like how does the Passover versus the Feast of Unleavened Bread relate to each other and all that stuff. And that is a thing you can study. I'm not going to go into that right now. That's too much for me to deal with right now. So we're gonna go with that. They're going to prepare the Passover. Okay, so you actually have to like get stuff ready. It's not just like, hey, you show up and then everything's good. Like you actually have to get stuff set up. Okay, so he said, go into the city to a certain person and tell him, the teacher says, my time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples. The disciples did as Jesus commanded them, and they prepared the Passover. So again, this for me is a lot like the triumphal entry with the donkey and the colt. Um, whether this was like, hey, Jesus just divinely knew this, and then whatever, or if he had pre-prepared it. This one sounds even more like he pre-prepared it with them. But what specific is going on? Unclear. Okay, but I think that's interesting. It kind of echoes what's going on there. Now, when evening had come, he was reclining at the table with the 12 disciples, and they were eating, and he said, "Most certainly I tell you that one of you will betray me." That's crazy talk, Jesus. What are you talking about? Okay, who would betray? Like, this is horrifying thoughts. While you're at a party, okay, and they're actually reclining because they're partying instead of like sitting, which they would normally do. And so they're hanging out, and then Jesus just like drops this on them. Okay. And they were exceedingly sorrowful, like shocked sorrowful. Okay. And each began to ask him, "It isn't me, is it, Lord?" And he answered, "He who dipped his hand with me in the dish will betray me. The Son of Man goes even as it is written of him, but woe to that man through whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would be better for that man if he had not been born." Okay, and so Jesus actually pulls this idea. This is from Psalm 41, all right? And it says, "Yes, my own familiar friend in whom I trusted, who ate bread with me, has lifted up his heel against me." Okay, so yeah, the person who's dipping his hand in the bowl, I'm going to be betrayed. You'll be betrayed. And he also says it would have been better for that person not to have been born, which is a common phrase for people in lament. Okay, that actually shows up in various places in the Old Testament. But we also have this thing in First Enoch. Okay, and this is the first time that we've jumped into the deuterocanonical, pseudepigraphal, whatever passages you want, however you want to call it, the apocrypha. Okay, right? And you have this passage in First Enoch 38. It says, "When the righteous one appears in front of the chosen righteous, whose works are weighed by the Lord of spirits, and when light appears to the righteous, the chosen, who dwell on the dry ground, where will be the dwelling of the sinners? And where will be the resting place of those who denied the Lord of spirits? It would have been better for them if they had not been born." So like in this second temple period, around, in this time frame, this idea of not just like, man, I wish I had never been born because my life is so horrible right now, but instead like, wow, those bad people, it would have been better had they not been born. Like this is now an idea, and Jesus plays into it here, which I think is so fascinating, okay? "And Judas, who betrayed him, answered, it isn't me, is it, Rabbi?" And notice, we've got Lord from the other people, and he's like, "Rabbi." Like, so here's another like textual thing that might be indicating that like, yeah, he didn't really think that Jesus was really what he said. Okay, and he said to him, so Jesus says to Judas, "You said it. It's not me." "Well, you said so." And then in the other passages, I think it's so funny because the people are like, "Well, what's up with Jesus? What's he doing?" Okay, I think it's funny that it's not clear to them what's going on as they're having this little moment. Okay, as they were eating, Jesus took bread, gave thanks for it, and broke it. He gave it to the disciples, and in this case, it doesn't say that Judas is left. Okay, like that's fascinating. Okay, and he said, "Take, eat. This is my body." And okay, so Jesus is taking the bread. Okay, this is all part of the normal Passover meal situation, okay? And what's interesting is he says, "Take, eat, this is my body." And apparently, in a Seder, and I'm not familiar with this, but basically I've heard that it's, this is the bread of affliction our ancestors ate when they came from Egypt. So Jesus is taking this thing that already, like, take this bread and eat. This is... And they're expecting, this is the bread of our ancestors. Instead, Jesus says, "This is my body." That's amazing, right? Jesus takes this well-worn idea and then flips it. He took the cup, gave thanks, and gave it to them, saying, "All of you drink it, for this is my blood of the new covenant, which is poured out for many for the remission of sins. But I tell you that I will not drink of this fruit of the vine from now on, until that day when I drink it anew with you in my Father's kingdom." Okay, Jeremiah 31. Yeah, 31. "Behold, the days come, says Yahweh, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which covenant of mine they broke, although I was a husband to them, says Yahweh. But this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says Yahweh. I will put my law in their inward parts, and I will write it in their heart. I will be their God, and they shall be my people. They will no longer each teach his neighbor, and every man teach his brother, saying, Know Yahweh, for they will all know me, from the least to their greatest, says Yahweh. For I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more. So here, right, that passage refers to the Passover and leading the people of Israel out of Egypt. And now here Jesus is at the Passover saying, this is the new covenant. Here it is. We're establishing it in my blood. Okay. My goodness. Okay. But he also says, hey, but by the way, oh man. Okay. But by the way, like my kingdom, right? The kingdom is coming, right? Like I'm not doing this for, until this happens again. Okay. And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. All right, so they're leaving. All right. And then Jesus said to them, all of you will be made to stumble because of me tonight. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I am raised up, I will go before you into Galilee. Okay, and here's another Zechariah passage. Again, this is within that shepherd's motif thing and this whole passage. So go study that. I'm looking forward to studying that, okay? Because I think there's some really good stuff to be found and mined there that would connect even greater to this because Jesus is using it this way. But it also has a lot of depth for what it is. Okay, wow, I'm excited. Okay, and we're setting up this idea of I will go before you into Galilee, which is important in looking at the different versions of the story across the different Gospels and all this. Okay, but yeah, okay, so here it is, this striking the shepherd, okay, and then you're going to be scattered. But Peter answered him, even if all will be made to stumble because of you, I will never be made to stumble. And Jesus said, most certainly I tell you that tonight, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And apparently roosters in this part of the world, depending on when, it's any time between 11:30 and 3:30 a.m. That's when they start crowing. So this isn't long time in the future. Jesus is no, you're about to betray me. It's gonna happen. Okay. All right. You will deny me 3 times. Peter said to him, even if I must die with you, I will not deny you. And all of the disciples also said likewise. We remember Peter says this, but everybody else does too. Everybody else is no, we're not deserting you. What are you talking about? Then Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane and said to his disciples, sit here while I go over there and pray. He took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee and began to be sorrowful and severely troubled. Then he said to them, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here and watch with me. Okay, so this is like the parables that Jesus has been telling about hey, be on watch, be ready, be ready. He's do that now, okay? Be ready, all right? He went forward a little, fell on his face and prayed, saying, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass away from me. Nevertheless, not what I desire, but what you desire. And notice we've already covered passages here where it's save me from this. Okay, this is still in Jesus' mind. God, save me if this is what we can do. But if not, I'm doing your will. He came to the disciples and found them sleeping and said to Peter, why couldn't you watch with me for 1 hour? Watch and pray that you don't enter into temptation. The spirit is indeed willing, but the flesh is weak. And apparently, you stayed up. This is the one time a year where you stay up. This is Passover. You stay up and you party and you talk to people and you do stuff and they fall asleep. So it's hey, you guys are like children. What are you doing? Stay up, right? And also, apparently, if somebody actually falls asleep and not just dozes off, but apparently, one of the rules or cultural norms is when somebody falls asleep, the party's over, everybody goes home at that point in time. So let's not end this party, okay? Jesus got some work to do. Again, a second time, he went away and prayed, saying, my Father, if this cup can't pass away from me unless I drink it, your desire be done. He came again and found them sleeping for their eyes were heavy. And this time he doesn't wake them up, right? He left them again, went away, and prayed a third time, saying the same words. Then he came to his disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Arise, let's be going. Behold, he who betrays me is at hand." Can you imagine? Like, you've fallen asleep, then you get woken up, and it's like, now's the time where we're all getting betrayed. It's all falling apart. Wait, what? What's happening, Jesus? What's going on? While he was still speaking, behold, Judas, one of the 12, came, and with him a great multitude with swords and clubs from the chief priests and elders of the people. And apparently, according to one commentary, they were saying that clubs, of course, fits with like the chief priests and the temple guard, but swords would be Roman, because you're not giving Jews swords, especially not during Passover. No way, we're not doing this. So it's like a group of both the temple thugs, okay, the mafia from the temple, as well as swords from Rome, okay? Now he who betrayed him, Judas, who betrayed Jesus, had given them, this group, a sign saying, "Whoever I kiss, he is the one, seize him." Immediately he came to Jesus and said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. This is like, oh man, bummer for us, but like, for that culture, this is horrifying. This is horrific, right? And there is a proverb, I think it's Proverbs like 2:7 or something like that. That's like, the wounds of a friend are faithful, but like the kisses of an enemy are multiple. So like that, there's some stuff there. Okay, but Jesus said to him, "Friend, why are you here?" Calls him friend still. They came and laid hands on Jesus and took him. Behold, one of those who were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. So this is Peter, from what we learn later. And so when Jesus is like, he's like, "Hey, Peter," right? "Watch and pray you don't enter into temptation." So what happens? Peter, I'm going to get him. Okay. Then Jesus said, "Put your sword back in its place, for all those who take the sword will die by the sword. Or do you think that I couldn't ask my Father, and he would even now send me more than 12 legions of angels? How then would the scriptures be fulfilled that it must be so?" Jesus is like, I got a legion of angels for each of you if we needed this, which we don't. Okay, like this is to fulfill scripture. And it's so fascinating, right? Because this introduces the idea, again, because he's already said it, but like that Jesus being killed was part of the plan all along. And it's in scripture, but it's not clear because it's hidden. In fact, there's that passage that says if they had known that, what was going to happen, they never would have killed Jesus, right? Like there's this whole idea with that it's there, but you have to but it's a puzzle that you have to put together. And I think that's really interesting. And here now for a second time, Jesus is like, hey, yeah, this has to happen because scripture says it's going to happen. Is that fascinating? Okay. In that hour, Jesus said to the multitudes, so now he's like, okay, I'm talking to now he's like, hey, everybody, okay, have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to seize me? I sat daily in the temple teaching, and you didn't arrest me. But all this has happened that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled. Okay, and I didn't see anything that said, okay, these are the passages specifically that Jesus is referencing, which I think is fascinating. There's probably some studying to be done for that. But Jesus is also pointing out, like, this is highly inappropriate. This is not okay. Like, what do you think I am? I've been teaching in the temple. It's not like it's been hard to find me. You had to come gather me up in the middle of the night from no. I've been right there. If you actually needed to find me, you knew where to find me. So this is something else that's going on. Then all the disciples left him and fled. We would never do that, Jesus. We're gone. Those who had taken Jesus led him away to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and elders were gathered together. But Peter followed him from a distance to the court of the high priest and entered in and sat with the officers to see the end. So Peter, he actually like does a lot better than we give him a lot of credit for, because he actually like, yeah, he runs, but then he like sneaks along and like sneaks into where like into the very den of the worst that's gonna happen. Like he's right there. Like this is dangerous. Like trespassing. He's trespassing in the high priest's house, and like this is he's right there where like everybody's gonna try and kill his rabbi. Like things are he's right there. Like that's gutsy. Okay. Now the chief priests, the elders, and the whole council sought false testimony against Jesus, that they might put him to death, and they found none. Even though many false witnesses came forward, they found none. Okay? This is amazing, right? So in Deuteronomy 19, all right, so we've got this idea of like, hey, you have to have at least 2 witnesses, okay? And if an unrighteous witness rises up against a man to testify, okay, and they go and they find out what it is, okay, and the judges make diligent inquisition, and behold, if the witness is a false witness and has testified falsely against his brother, then you shall do to him as he had thought to do to his brothers, so you shall remove the evil from among you. Those that remain will hear and fear, and never commit such an evil again. So clearly they're finding that they're actually false witnesses, like it, and yet they keep going. Like this is not a real trial. This is not a fair trial. This is not even a lawful trial. This is a very unlawful trial. Even if you just were to ignore like all of the Pharisaical rules that were in place that they're already breaking, the fact that we're like going against clear scriptural teaching. Okay, and not even like later scripture, right? Because remember, they only care about the first 5 books, if we're talking about the Sadducees. Okay, and this is in Deuteronomy, this rule. If it's a false witness, then we're done. And so they're finding multiple false witnesses, and they're not working, and the trial's still not done. Super biased. Okay. But at last, 2 false witnesses came forward and said, this man said, I'm going to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days. So this guy said crazy things. We don't know what's going on. Remember, we went over this? Like, what crazy thing is this? Okay. The high priest stood up and said to him, have you no answer? What is it that these testify against you? Okay, so apparently, the high priest stays seated through this whole thing. And the high priest is not supposed to get directly involved in getting people to testify against themselves. Like, that's not one of the rules. Like, there's these rules, okay? And they're breaking all of them. They're breaking every single one of these rules, okay? But Jesus stayed silent. The high priest answered him, I adjure you by the living God that you tell us whether you are the Christ, the Son of God. So he's like, okay, I'm going to call down I'm calling on God to make you tell me now. And Jesus said to him, you've said so. Just like he said to Judas. Nevertheless, I tell you, after this, you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of the sky. So we've talked about this many, many times before, okay? This is that Deuteronomy 7:13 through 14 section, the coming on the clouds and all that stuff. The idea of the right hand of power, okay? That's God, okay? It's capitalized here. Okay? That is a reference to God, okay? And then the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of God, okay? That comes from Psalm 2, okay? I've set my king on my holy hill in Zion. I will tell you of the decree. Yahweh said to me, you are my son. Today I have become your father. Ask of me, and I will give you the nations for your inheritance, the uttermost parts of the earth for your possession. You shall break them with the rod of iron. You shall dash them to pieces like a potter's vessel. Now therefore be wise, you kings. Be instructed, you judges of the earth. Serve Yahweh with fear and rejoice with trembling. Okay? This is setting up this figure, this messianic figure who's going to be in charge of everything. Jesus is claiming association with God himself, as well as being the Messiah, but way more than they think. Okay? He's coming on the clouds, all right? Then the high priest tore his clothes, saying, he has spoken blasphemy. Why do we need any more witnesses? Behold, now you have heard his testimony. What do you think? All right, so when you hear testimony when you hear blasphemy in front of you, then you're supposed to tear your garment, okay? And there's like rules against like the high priest shouldn't even do that, and lots of stuff. But like blasphemy is so bad that you're ripping your clothes. And today we're like, ripping your clothes? Like, what's that all about? Well, again, clothes are like super expensive. So it'd be like, smash your car. It's like, this is so bad that we have to destroy the things that are in the presence of this evil, blasphemous stuff. There is debate in the commentaries about whether what Jesus does is blasphemy. Like, I guess it's not technically because he doesn't actually invoke the name of God or anything here. But at the same time, the high priest is definitely picking up what Jesus is putting down. The divine claim is very clear. Now, Jesus is technically blaspheme? No. But like, it is clear what Jesus is doing and saying. And Caiaphas gets it. So now he needs testimony from other people. Other people have to witness this, right? We're doing the witness thing. And they answered, he is worthy of death. Then they spat in his face and beat him with their fists, and some slapped him, saying, prophesy to us, you Christ, you Messiah. Who hit you? They can't actually put him to death, though. They don't have the power. They don't have the authority. They need Rome to do that. So now they're going to have to set it up so that it's not just that he's claiming to be God and that he's claiming to be whom Israel's waiting for all this time, but that he's actually a crazed revolutionary who's trying to kick out Rome and do all this stuff, which Jesus has repeatedly said he's not doing. So that's the next section. They got to figure out how to do that to get Rome to actually do their dirty work. We're going to stop here for now. I hope this has been super interesting because I found this fascinating, just how many tie-ins to the Old Testament there are. Okay, see you next time.